Up until now, we've looked at the costs associated with buying a car and car ownership. But at this point, we're going to switch a little bit and look at what it would be if we were to lease a vehicle. So a lease is basically when you rent a vehicle for a set period of time, and it could be anywhere between 1 to 4 years. And when you lease a vehicle, you're required to make a down payment at signing. You're required to pay a monthly amount on this lease. They give you a specific number of miles you can drive this car per year, and if you go over those miles, they charge you an amount per mileage. On here I put that it's typically 25 cents per mile. That's a very good average in estimating that. The person that is leasing the vehicle is responsible for any repairs and maintenance that are required on the vehicle at that time. And then at the end of the lease, you are actually required to return the car to the dealer. And at that time, if you went over your total mileage, that's when you would actually pay that surcharge for using it. In addition, at the end of a lease, if you decided that you wanted to buy that car after all, you could actually buy it, and they would help you to become the owner of that car. So the money that you paid while you were leasing it does not necessarily go towards the purchase price of the car, but what happens is the car goes down in value, and so you would pay for that car at the value that the car is currently. Now there's a few things to consider when you're setting up your lease. If you're worried about the amount of your monthly payment, there's a few ways to get a lower monthly payment. One is if you pay more money down at signing, then the amount of money that you pay per month will be less. In addition, if you need less mileage per year, then the amount of money you pay for your lease is going to be less. And the longer that you lease a vehicle, the cheaper your monthly payment would be. So if you leased it for 2 years versus 4 years, the monthly payment is less for leasing it for 4 years than it is for leasing it for 2 years. Now, I will say that to lease a vehicle is actually not a cheaper option. But there's many reasons that people would want to lease a vehicle. So sometimes we don't always make our choices based off of the finances of it. There's reasons people would do this. So the first instance would be a business might want to constantly upgrade their car every year for whatever reason. Maybe they put a lot of miles on it. Maybe it's a rep that they have for a pharmaceutical company and they want them to have a nice vehicle. So every year they just have a contract with a dealership and they upgrade the car every single year. So they lease it from them, pay off whatever mileage they put on it, and they get a new car. You also have people that don't drive their cars very much and they don't want to mess with repairs and maintenance that come along with owning an older car. So in the section of the book where we talked about repairs and maintenance, there are expensive repairs and maintenance towards the end of life of a car, or even around 100,000 miles on a car. With a lease, you're only leasing it for maybe 12,000 miles a year, and if you had it for 3 years, that's 36,000 miles. The main things you're looking at is getting an oil change, possibly changing the transmission fluid and flushing that, maybe replacing your headlight, getting new windshield wipers, but there's not a lot of repairs and maintenance that are going to be required on a car that only has 36,000 miles on it. There really are some people that just want to have the latest and greatest vehicle, and a lease is a fantastic option for them to do that if they want. They don't need to worry about selling their previous car, and they can just trade their lease in every 3 years and get a brand new vehicle. And the last option would be there are people who can't afford to buy a car new. So they would want to lease a car rather than buying it, and then at the end of the lease, instead of turning the car back in, they may buy the car outright at that time. This is really not a good reason at all to lease a car because typically what happens is at the end of the lease, the dealer would evaluate how much that car is worth, and then you would have a payment on that car. So your payment might extend quite a long time. Like you've leased it for 3 years, then you get a 5-year loan. That means you're paying on this car for 8 years, and at the end of 8 years, you're pretty much going to need to get a new car possibly, because it depends on how many miles you've put on it, but the car might not be in great shape. So that is a terrible idea and not a good reason to lease. Now, I had mentioned that you could have different monthly payment amounts based off of your mileage and based off of your down payment. So the first 2 items listed here is a Nissan Altima and a GMC Canyon. And you can see here that the down payment is actually the same amount as the monthly payment. And for each one of these vehicles, they only offer 10,000 miles on the car. And that's a pretty low payment, and that's a pretty low down payment. However, if you look at the Kia Soul, what I've done here is I've given 3 options for 3 different mileage amounts. So the standard would be you can have a lease for 10,000 miles, 12,000 miles, or 15,000 miles. And the more miles you need it per year, the more your monthly payment will be. In addition, you can see here also that the down payment also increased based off of the number of miles you needed per year. And most likely that was due to they wanted to keep the monthly payment somewhat similar, so they made the final adjustment to the down payment. But it's definitely cheaper to lease a vehicle with lower mileage requirements than it would be to lease a vehicle where you require more miles. The last item I'm showing you on here is a Chevy Trailblazer, and you can see here that the length of the lease increases. So the first lease option is a 2-year option, 24 months, and then it goes to a 3-year option and a 4-year option. And if you look at the monthly payments here, the down payment's the same, the mileage is the same, but the monthly payment is much higher for a 2-year lease versus a 4-year lease. And that has a lot to do with the fact that cars lose a lot of value in the first couple years of life, but once they get to the 3-year-old mark and the 4-year-old mark, they aren't losing nearly as much value. So those 2 monthly payments are similar, but the 24-month payment would be a lot higher because it just loses so much value. Okay, so here's some practice problems. The first problem is Susan Stanton would like to lease a 2022 Kia Soul. She wants her monthly payment to be as low as possible. She will be leasing this vehicle for 36 months, and at the end of the lease, she anticipates having an ending mileage of 38,000 miles, and any miles over the allowable mileage are charged at 25 cents per mile. Which lease option should she choose? So if we go back and look at our chart for the Kia Soul, we can see here the cheapest monthly payment would be the top one, with an annual mileage of 10,000 miles per year. That's going to be her cheapest monthly payment. However, when we look at that, that really might not be her best option. And the only way to see what her best option is to actually calculate how much is this going to cost her to lease the car at these different options. So we're going to go on ahead and calculate out how much it would cost. So the first thing we have to consider is what's the down payment. Well, for a 10,000 mile lease, the down payment is going to be $1,040. For the 12,000 mile lease, it's $1,046. And then for the 15,000 mile lease, it's $1,506. So that's our down payment. The next thing we need to calculate is how much are our total payments going to be. So I'm going to take this monthly payment amount and I'm going to multiply it by 36 months. And when I do, the amount of my lease, or the amount of payments I make, is actually $14,040 if I were to make all of those payments for the 10,000 miles per year option. This 12,000 miles per year option would cost me $14,256. That's taking this $396 times 36. And then for the $15,000 option, it's going to cost me $14,616. And that doesn't seem like much of a difference overall. There's only like a $600 difference from the 10,000 miles per year to the 15,000 miles per year. What ends up being a big difference is actually the extra payment you need to make for the mileage. So in this case, we were only allowed to have 30,000 miles. That's because I took 3 years times 10,000 miles per year gives me 30,000 miles. So I went over by 8,000 miles because, as I mentioned up here, she drove it for 38,000 miles. Well, down here, since I went over by 8,000 miles, I'm going to take 8,000 and I'm going to multiply it by my rate of 25 cents per mile. And when I do, that means I'm going to pay an extra $2,000 at closing because of going over in mileage. For the 12,000 mile per year option, that means I had 36,000 miles I could drive the car overall. 12 times 3 is 36, and I drove it 38,000 miles. So I went over by 2,000 miles, which is a lot less. So 2,000 miles times 25 cents per mile only gives me an extra payment of $500 is all that's going to give me. Oops, 5 went away. Over here, I didn't go over the mileage. 15,000 miles times 3 years is 45,000 miles, and I only drove it for 38. So there's no extra charge here at all. So what I need to do is add all of these up, and I can see how much each option cost me. So for this first option of 10,000 miles per year, it's going to cost me $17,080. For the second option of 12,000 per year, it's going to cost me $15,802. And then for the final option, it cost me $16,122. So the cheapest option overall is actually going to be the 12,000 miles per year. And again, if you are looking at leasing a car, you would want to go through each option and see which one was cheaper. Don't be so worried about going over in mileage, because as we can see, paying for those extra miles you didn't use is actually more expensive than going over by a couple thousand miles instead. Now the next option looks at what does it cost to lease a car versus buy a car. And so in this instance, we have Taylor Thompson wants to buy a Chevy Trailblazer. They're trying to determine if they should buy or lease it. The value of the car new is $27,200. To buy it, they would put $0 down and pay $772 per month for 3 years. To lease, they would put $2,000 down and pay $319 per month. They're allowed 12,000 miles per year, and they do not expect to exceed this mileage. The value at the end of 3 years is $15,800, meaning if they wanted to sell it, that's what they could sell it for. Should they buy or lease this car? So there's a few things we're going to need to assess here. Some of the things we need to assess is we're going to need to see, what is our down payment? We're going to need to determine how much are we paying overall for those monthly payments. So total monthly, abbreviate this, payments. And then we also need to consider what we could get for the car if we were selling it. Okay, so for the new car, when we look at the new car, we don't have to pay any money down at all. Whereas if we want to lease, I guess I should say buy. If we want to lease it, we do actually have a down payment, and our down payment is $2,000 if we lease it. So buying it, nothing. Leasing it, $2,000. Now, if we want to know how much we're paying overall for all of those monthly payments, for the first option, if we buy it, our monthly payment is $772 per month, and we're paying that for 3 years. Now, if you do $772 times 36 months, the cost of this is $27,792. And with a lease, we're only having to pay $319 per month. So I'm going to take $319 and I'm going to multiply it by 36 months, and that's going to give me $11,484. So far the amount of money that I'm paying for this car, this one is $13,484 if I lease it, and if I buy it new, I've spent in cash $27,792. So at first you're looking at this saying, okay, well, why would anybody buy this car? Why would we not just lease it? I spent a lot less cash over the 3 years. It's very difficult to compare these two options at this point, because when you're looking at these two options, I'm saying I've only used it for 3 years. And at this point, at the end of 3 years, I paid off the new car. But if I lease it, I'm going to have to buy or get another lease, and I'm going to spend more money. So at this point, what we need to do to compare these two options is say, what if I sell this car today, and how much did it cost me to use the car for 3 years? So if I were to sell the car today, I could get $15,800 on this car. And if I were to sell the lease, since I don't own it, I can't do that. That's not even an option. So By selling this car, that means I'm recouping this $15,800 back on the cash that I've already paid out. So the difference between that, if I subtract this off, because this is going to reduce the amount of money that I've spent in cash, is going to be $11,992. Whereas this one, because I didn't get any money back, it's going to be $13,484. So by comparing how much cash would be spent by buying the car, paying for it over 3 years, and then selling it, it's actually a lot cheaper overall just to buy it. And then if you consider future, in the future, over here, if you keep having a leased car, you keep having a payment. At this point, if you bought it new, you don't have a payment. Many times people keep cars when they don't have any value left on them. So after 10 years, it's assumed that a car has barely any value. We have cars that are easily over 10 years old and we just don't have a car payment. So we can keep extending what we're using. Now we do have to pay for repairs and maintenance, but in this instance, if you just wanted to compare what it is to lease a new car versus buy a new car, even if you wanted to get a new car every 3 years, you're better off buying the brand new car and then selling it at the end of that time period. That is still a cheaper option.